My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and my story begins the afternoon I realized my own mother no longer wanted me in her life. I had just finished my shift at the diner, thinking I'd head home to rest, when my phone buzzed with a message I'll never forget. It wasn't long, just a few lines, but the words cut deeper than anything she had ever said to me. All the locks are changed. This isn't your home anymore. My chest tightened, my hand shook, and in that instant, my world collapsed into something unrecognizable. White right pointing backhand index. Before I share what happened next, tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. I sat in my old Honda outside the house that had been mine since childhood, staring at the windows as if they'd answer for what my mother had done. The curtains were drawn, but I could still picture the living room inside, the worn couch my dad never let her replace, the little scratch on the hardwood floor where I dropped my first bike helmet. That house wasn't just walls and furniture. It was my father's voice echoing through the hallways, his laughter in the kitchen when he burned the toast, his calm hand on my shoulder when life felt too heavy. And now, with one text message, it had been ripped away. The irony of it all was that I hadn't even fought with my mom that week. There had been tensions, of course. There always were. She thought I wasn't living up to her standards, that I should have been married with children by now, instead of working long hours at a diner while running my small side business from my laptop at night. But she'd never said anything this final, this cruel. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale, trying to make sense of the words on my screen. This isn't your home anymore. Not our home, not her home, but not mine. As if I was a stranger. As if my father hadn't told me, just months before he passed, that no matter what, this house was meant for me. My phone buzzed again. For a split second, I hoped she might take it back, that maybe it was just anger talking. But the second message was even colder. Don't come back. They'll be moving in soon. They. I knew exactly who she meant. My aunt's family, people who had circled my father's funeral like vultures, already whispering about what would happen with the house. They weren't grieving, they were calculating. I got out of the car, my knees weak but my anger strong enough to push me forward. I walked up to the driveway, heart pounding in my ears, and tried my old key in the lock. It didn't fit. She hadn't lied. The locks had already been changed. I pressed my forehead against the door, whispering like a child again, "Dad, what do I do?" A memory hit me so hard I almost staggered. I was 8 years old, crying in the same driveway after losing a spelling bee. My father had knelt down, brushed the tears from my cheeks, and said, "This house is your safe place. No matter what happens out there, you'll always belong here." Now, standing in the same spot, it felt like he had lied. Or maybe, worse, it was my mother who was rewriting his promise. I backed away, swallowing the lump in my throat, and noticed the curtains shift in the upstairs window. My mother's shadow stood there, rigid and still, watching me. She didn't come to the door. She didn't wave. She just stood there until the light flicked off. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a fight I could fix with an apology or a calm conversation. She had already chosen sides, and I wasn't on hers. I climbed back into my car and sat there for what felt like hours, replaying every sign I should have noticed sooner. The way she avoided mentioning the war when Dad was sick. How she spent more time with her sister's family than with me. The way she snapped at me the last time I brought up Dad's promise about the house. She had been preparing this betrayal for months, maybe even years, and I had been too blinded by grief to see it. Finally, I drove away, not home, because I no longer had one, but to the little diner where I sometimes worked extra shifts. I sat in a booth at the back, ordered a cup of coffee I couldn't taste, and opened my phone again. That's when I saw it, an unread email sitting in my inbox, the subject line bold and chilling. "We need to talk immediately." It was from a law office downtown. I almost laughed at the timing. First my mother, now some lawyer I'd never met, demanding my attention like the universe was piling it on. But something in me stirred. A whisper, maybe my father's voice again, telling me not to ignore it. I opened the message. My hands trembled as I scrolled, the words blurring together until one line cut through the fog. There are documents regarding your father's estate that you need to see before it's too late. Too late. The phrase sent chills down my spine. I didn't know what the lawyer had, or why he was reaching out to me now, but I knew this. The text from my mother wasn't just an act of cruelty. It was part of something bigger, something I wasn't supposed to uncover. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "This isn't over." Because in that moment, as much as it broke me, I realized my mother had underestimated me. She thought I'd read her message, cry in my car, and disappear quietly from the story of that house. But she didn't know that losing him, lit a fire in me I didn't even know I had. The message had changed everything. It had broken me, yes, but it had also awakened me. And soon, she was going to learn that I wasn't just my father's daughter. I was his heir, and I was ready to fight for what he left behind. The next morning, I woke with the kind of restlessness that doesn't let you breathe until you act. My phone lay on the nightstand, the email from the law office glowing at me like a challenge. I hadn't slept much, only tossed and turned in the tiny rented room above the diner, the hum of the neon sign outside seeping through the curtains. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, steady, kind, full of promises that seemed to vanish the moment the locks on our house changed. By 9 a.m., I was parked downtown, staring up at a slate-gray building with tall glass doors. The brass plaque beside the entrance read, Caldwell and Myers, Estate and Family Law. The name felt heavy, like it already knew the kind of storm I was walking into. I forced my feet forward, up the stone steps, through the rotating door that hissed as if sealing me inside. The lobby smelled of polished wood and faintly of old paper. A receptionist in a navy blazer looked up and gave a professional but distant smile. "Appointment?" she asked. "Claire Morgan. I was emailed yesterday." My voice cracked halfway through my name. She tapped on her keyboard, nodded, and gestured toward a row of chairs. "Mr. Myers will be with you shortly." I sat down, folding my hands in my lap, trying not to notice how small I felt in that cavernous lobby with its marble floors and oil paintings of men who looked like they never worried about losing a home. Every tick of the wall clock felt like it was counting down to something I couldn't escape. When my name was finally called, I followed a younger man in a gray suit down a hallway lined with heavy doors. He led me into an office with shelves packed tight with binders and leather-bound volumes. Behind a walnut desk sat Mr. Myers, a man with silver hair and glasses that seemed to magnify the sternness in his eyes. "Ms. Morgan," he said, standing to shake my hand. His grip was firm, his gaze even firmer. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, settling into the leather chair across from him. My palms were already damp. "I'll be direct," he began, opening a thick folder in front of him. "This concerns your father's estate. Specifically, the home on Pinecrest Lane." At the sound of my childhood address, my throat tightened. He continued, flipping through pages. "Your father came to this office approximately 2 years before his passing. He updated his will and left very explicit instructions regarding the property." My heart hammered. My mother's texts from the night before replayed in my head. "This isn't your home anymore." Mr. Myers slid a document across the desk. "This is a copy of the amended will. You should read it carefully." The paper trembled in my hands as I scanned the lines. Legal phrases blurred, but certain words stood out in sharp relief. Sole beneficiary, Claire Morgan. Full ownership. My father's signature sat at the bottom, steady and deliberate. I blinked hard, as if clearing my vision would change the meaning. "So, the house, he left it to me." "Correct," Mr. Myers said. "In its entirety. Your mother's name does not appear in the amended will." The room spun for a moment. I clutched the edge of the desk to steady myself. Anger surged through me, not at my father, but at the betrayal that had unfolded behind my back. "She knew," I whispered. "She had to know." Mr. Myers adjusted his glasses. It's possible she was aware, but chose not to disclose it. We often see disputes when updated documents conflict with family expectations. I laughed bitterly. Expectations? She changed the locks before I even knew this existed. He closed the folder, his expression softening just slightly. You have legal grounds to contest any transfer of ownership she attempts. But it won't be easy. Family disputes rarely are. I sat there, torn between grief and fury, the weight of the papers heavy in my lap. Part of me wanted to cry, to crumble under the betrayal, but another part of me, the part that remembered my father's words, refused to. Can I take this with me? I asked. Mr. Myers nodded. That's your copy. I suggest you keep it safe. And Claire, he paused, leaning forward, lowering his voice. There may be more. When your father came here, he didn't just bring instructions for the house. He deposited a sealed envelope. It was addressed to you. My head jerked up. An envelope. He opened a drawer, pulling out a small cream-colored envelope with my name written across it in my father's handwriting. My breath caught in my throat. I shouldn't be here, I murmured, fingers tracing the ink. He should be the one giving this to me. For a long moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. The paper felt fragile, like holding a piece of him that might vanish if I wasn't careful. Finally, with trembling hands, I tore the seal. Inside was a letter written in his familiar cursive. Claire, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you in person. I need you to know that I left the house to you because I trust you to protect what matters. There are people who will try to take it from you. They'll say it belongs to them, but they are wrong. Everything I've built, I built with you in mind. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. You are stronger than you think, and when the time comes, I believe you'll fight for what is yours. Dad. Tears blurred the ink as I finished reading. My hand shook, clutching the letter like a lifeline. Mr. Myers gave me a moment before speaking again. You see, Ms. Morgan, your father anticipated resistance. That's why he came here. He wanted this paper trail to exist. He wanted you to have proof. Proof. The word echoed in my head. Proof against my own mother. Proof that the house, the memories, the promise, none of it was his to rewrite. I tucked the letter back into the envelope, pressing it to my chest. For the first time since his passing, I felt his presence, not in the house I could no longer enter, but in the ink of his words, urging me forward. When I finally stood to leave, Mr. Myers shook my hand again. One piece of advice, he said. Do not underestimate those who feel entitled. They'll come for you harder than you expect. Outside, the city buzzed with midday life, cars honking, vendors shouting, people rushing past me as if I wasn't carrying the weight of a revelation in my purse. I walked aimlessly for blocks, gripping the envelope, replaying my father's words in my head. I thought betrayal had ended with the change locks. But now, holding proof in my hands, I realized betrayal was only the beginning. I stood outside the gate of Pinecrest Lane that evening, my father's letter burning in my purse like a secret too heavy to carry. The house loomed in the distance, its familiar roofline cutting through the twilight sky. But instead of warmth, I felt something colder, a wall between me and the place I once called home. The garden, once trimmed with my father's precision, looked different now. My mother had planted roses that didn't belong, colors too bright, too staged, like an attempt to rewrite the past with her own version of beauty. I rested my hand on the gate, my knuckles white against the iron bars. The locks glistened where they had been replaced, a small metallic reminder of the day I was shut out. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my brother, Mark. His name flashing across the screen made my stomach twist. I answered anyway. Claire, he said, his tone already defensive. What are you doing at the house? How do you know I'm here? I asked, scanning the windows. I'm inside, he replied, his voice flat. Mom told me you'd come eventually. She said you'd try something. A bitter laugh slipped from my lips. Try something? Mark, this is my home. Dad left it to me. Silence. Then a scoff. You really think a piece of paper changes anything? Mom built this place with him. She deserves it. I clenched the gate tighter. That's not true and you know it. I've got proof. Legal proof. Dad made sure of it. The line crackled with his sharp exhale. You think you're going to waltz in here with some lawyer and tear this family apart? That's not strength, Claire. That's selfishness. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. Selfishness is throwing me out like I was nothing. Selfishness is pretending Dad's wishes didn't matter. The front door opened then, and Mark stepped out onto the porch. He was taller than me, broader, his shadow stretching long across the driveway. He held the phone still pressed to his ear, but his eyes locked on mine from across the yard. Leave, he said aloud now, lowering the phone. His voice carried across the space like a final command. I didn't move. Instead, I pushed the gate open, the metal groaning as if it, too, resisted me. My steps were slow but deliberate. Every inch of that driveway held a memory, chalk drawings that washed away in the rain. Dad teaching me how to balance on my first bike, evenings spent chasing fireflies. I wasn't going to let those memories be erased so easily. Mark moved down the porch steps, blocking my path before I reached the front door. His jaw was tight, his fists clenched. You need to think about what you're doing, he warned. You drag lawyers into this, and you'll regret it. I met his eyes, refusing to look away. What I regret is believing you'd stand by me. You were Dad's son too. Doesn't his word mean anything to you? His eyes flickered, just for a second, before hardening again. Don't twist this. You've always wanted to be the favorite. Well, congratulations, you got the will. But Mom and we're the ones keeping this house alive. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they carried a shot of the bond we once had. Mark had been my protector once, my partner in late-night talks and backyard adventures. But now, standing between me and the door, he felt like a stranger wearing my brother's face. The screen door creaked, and my mother appeared in the doorway. Her hair was pinned neatly, her blouse pressed as if she'd dressed for a performance. She looked down at us with cool detachment. Claire, she said, her voice laced with disdain. I see you found your way back. My chest tightened. Dad left this house to me. I have his will, his letter. He wanted me to protect it. Her eyes narrowed. Your father was sick. He didn't know what he was doing. I pulled the envelope from my purse, holding it up like a shield. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he trusted me, not you. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cicadas in the trees seemed to hush. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line as she stepped forward. You think a signature makes you the rightful owner? She asked quietly, her voice low and sharp. A house is more than paper. It's blood, sacrifice, and history. Things you don't understand. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. I understand perfectly. I understand that Dad gave me his trust, and you took it and twisted it into something cruel. For the first time, her mask cracked. A flicker of something, fear, maybe, flashed across her eyes before she turned away. Mark shifted beside me, his voice lower now. Claire, don't do this. Don't rip us apart. I swallowed hard, staring at the door behind him. It wasn't just wood and paint. It was the threshold between the family I once knew and the strangers they had become. I didn't do this, I whispered. You did. When you locked me out, when you pretended Dad's voice didn't matter, you divided us. Not me. The tension snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Mark took a step back, but he didn't move aside. My mother disappeared into the house, the door shutting softly, like the closing of a chapter she thought she controlled. I stood there, the evening air thick with unsaid words, my heart pounding in my ears. The envelope in my hand felt heavier than ever. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was a battlefield. And for the first time, I knew I wasn't leaving quietly. The night settled heavy around me as I lingered on the driveway, the glow from the porch light casting a sharp halo around Mark's silhouette. My fingers still clutched the envelope, but my grip had loosened, the edges had softened beneath the dampness of my palm. The house loomed larger in the dark, its windows like watchful eyes, each one holding a memory I wasn't sure I wanted to face. Mark turned away first, retreating up the steps with a muttered curse, his broad shoulders stiff as though carrying a burden he refused to name. The screen door snapped shut behind him, and the sound echoed in the silence. I stood rooted, staring at the door that had closed me out twice in one night. My throat ached, my chest burning with a mix of defiance and grief. A breeze rustled the oak branches above me, and I could almost hear Dad's voice in it, calm and steady, urging me not to let go. But the shadows pressed in, and with them came memories I had tried for years to bury. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting cross-legged in the hallway while Dad patched a hole in the drywall after one of their arguments. Mom had slammed a picture frame so hard against the wall that shards of glass had skittered across the floor, glinting like tiny stars in the carpet. I'd helped Dad sweep them up, his hand gentle on my shoulder as he whispered, "Some things are easier to fix than others." The scent of plaster dust came back to me now, sharp and real, and I blinked against the sting in my eyes. That was the beginning, I realized, the first crack in a house that would eventually split down the middle. A car rolled slowly down the street, its headlights sweeping across the yard. I stepped back into the shadows instinctively, my heart pounding as if I were trespassing on my own history. The gate creaked behind me, and I froze. "Claire!" The voice was soft, uncertain. I turned to see Mrs. Larkin, the neighbor who'd lived next door since I was a child. Her cardigan was wrapped tight around her, and she held a small flashlight that barely cut through the dark. "I thought that was you," she said, her lined face breaking into a weary smile. "It's been a while." I swallowed hard, forcing my voice steady. "Hi, Mrs. Larkin. Sorry if I'm disturbing you." She shook her head. "Not at all. I couldn't sleep. Heard voices earlier, raised ones." Her eyes flicked toward the house. "Guess not much has changed in there." Something inside me cracked at her words. "It's worse," I admitted. "Dad left the house to me. They don't want to accept it." Mrs. Larkin's gaze softened, and she stepped closer. "Your father, he was proud of you. Always told me you were the one with his determination." Her words hit me like a wave. Dad's absence, once a dull ache, surged into something sharper. For a moment I couldn't breathe. "Did you ever notice things?" I asked suddenly, surprising even myself. "Things between them? Things Dad maybe didn't tell me?" Mrs. Larkin hesitated. The flashlight trembled slightly in her hand. "Claire, I don't know if it's my place." "Please," I whispered. She sighed, glancing again at the darkened windows. "Your father, he carried more weight than he let on. I'd see him out in the yard late at night, sitting alone. He tried to shield you, but there were disagreements. About money, about you. He wanted to invest in your future. She thought he spoiled you." The words lodged in my chest. I thought of every cold glance from Mom, every time she'd accused me of wasting resources on dreams too big. Suddenly, it wasn't just disapproval, it was resentment that had been simmering for years. Mrs. Larkin touched my arm lightly. "Be careful, Claire. The past has long roots. And this house," she paused, her eyes shadowed. "It remembers everything." Before I could respond, a sharp knock rattled the window above the porch. Mark's silhouette appeared, his hand pressed flat against the glass, his eyes burning into the night. Mrs. Larkin stepped back quickly. "I should go," she murmured. "But remember, your father's truth is stronger than their denial. Don't let them rewrite it." With that, she disappeared into her yard, her flashlight bobbing like a fading star. I stood frozen, Mark's figure still looming above. He didn't open the window. He just stood there, watching, until the light inside flicked off and his shadow vanished. Left alone again, I turned toward the oak tree by the edge of the yard. Its roots jutted through the soil, familiar and unyielding. I had buried a time capsule there once, Dad's idea. We'd filled it with trinkets, my broken locket, a toy car, one of his cufflinks. "For the future," he'd said with a wink. My chest tightened as I knelt, brushing away the dirt with my hands. The earth was damp, clinging beneath my nails, but I dug until my fingers struck something solid. A rusted tin box. My breath caught as I pried it open. Inside, beneath the faded trinkets, lay a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully, my pulse hammering. It was Dad's handwriting. If you're reading this, Claire, it means you've come looking. Don't forget, truth doesn't hide in walls or papers, it hides in people. Some will try to bury it, but you know where to look. Tears blurred the ink as I pressed the paper to my chest. It wasn't just sentiment. It was a message, a clue. Behind me, the house loomed silent, but I felt its weight pressing down. Every wall held secrets. Every shadow stretched long with memories I hadn't yet uncovered. And suddenly, I knew, this fight wasn't just about inheritance. It was about truth. About the darkness my father had carried alone, the darkness my mother and brother now seemed desperate to keep buried. The past wasn't gone. It was alive, breathing through the cracks of this house, and it was calling me deeper into its shadows. The paper trembled in my hands, but it wasn't from the cold. Dad's words burned through me, sharp as if he'd spoken them aloud. You know where to look. He wasn't talking about this tin box, or the dusty memories buried under oak roots. He was pointing me toward something hidden in plain sight, something the others wanted locked away. I straightened, clutching the note tight, and turned back toward the house. The windows stayed back at me, hollow and unblinking, the silence daring me to enter. For the first time that night, I wasn't afraid of what waited inside. The door gave easily beneath my hand, the hinges whining like a protest as I stepped over the threshold. The air was thick, carrying the smell of lemon cleaner laid over something older, stale, suffocating, like secrets left too long in the dark. Claire. Mom's voice cut through the hallway before I even reached the living room. She sat in Dad's recliner, her spine rigid, her eyes glittering in the dim light. Mark leaned against the fireplace, arms folded, his face twisted into a half-smirk that didn't reach his eyes. You're still here, Mom said flatly. I'm not leaving. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I unfolded the note slowly, letting the paper catch the light. Dad left me this. He wanted me to know there's more than what's written in legal papers. Mark scoffed. You think a scrap of paper dug up from the dirt changes anything? Maybe it does, I shot back. Maybe it proves there's more he wanted me to find. Mom's eyes flicked toward the note, then back to me. For the briefest second, I saw something crack in her expression. Not fear exactly, but recognition. And that was enough. Where is it? I asked softly, stepping closer. What are you hiding? The silence stretched, thick and taut. Mark's jaw clenched, his fists balling at his sides, but Mom stayed still, her hands resting on the armrest like a queen guarding her throne. Finally, she said, you wouldn't understand. I laughed bitterly. Try me. She rose slowly, every movement deliberate, and crossed to the built-in cabinet near the far wall. My stomach twisted. Dad's cabinet. The one he'd always kept locked, the key dangling on his chain. I remembered trying to pry it open once as a child, only to be met with his calm but firm voice. Not everything is ready for you yet, Claire. Mom pulled a small key from her pocket. My heart stuttered. Dad had always worn it. How long had she kept it hidden? The lock clicked, and the cabinet creaked open. Inside were stacks of envelopes, neat piles of ledgers, and at the very back, a worn leather-bound book. Mom hesitated before touching it, her fingers trembling in a way I had never seen. I stepped forward, my voice low. That's it, isn't it? Mark pushed off the fireplace, his tone sharp. Don't even think about it, Claire. But I was already moving. Before either of them could stop me, I snatched the book from the shelf. The leather was warm against my palms, as if it had been waiting for me. I flipped it open, the pages filled with Dad's handwriting. Business records, notes, sketches, plans he hadn't shared with anyone. And there, tucked between the pages, were letters. Letters addressed to me. My vision blurred as I read the first one. Claire, if you're reading this, you've had to fight harder than I wanted for you. But the truth is yours to hold. This farm, this house, it was never just about land. It was about legacy, and that legacy is yours. The word struck deep, sharper than any blade. All the doubts, all the gaslighting from Mom and Mark, it crumbled in that moment. Dad hadn't left things unfinished. He'd left me instructions. Mark lunged forward, ripping the book from my hands. The pages tore with a sickening rip, scattering across the floor. Stop! My voice cracked as I dropped to my knees, scrambling to gather the letters. This is his. Mark towered over me, his breath ragged. You don't deserve any of it. You left. You walked away, and I stayed. I carried the weight while you chased your little dreams. I clutched the pages to my chest, meeting his glare. Dad didn't see it that way. He knew what I was capable of, even if you never did. Mom's voice cut through the tension, colder than ice. He spoiled you. He always did. Everything you touch, he handed to you. But not this time. I stood slowly, my legs shaking but my grip on the papers firm. You can rewrite the story all you want, but the truth is right here, and I'm not letting it go. For a moment, the three of us stood locked in silence, the air heavy with everything unspoken. The fire popped in the hearth, throwing sparks that faded before they touched the rug. Then I moved, not with rage, but with purpose. I gathered the scattered letters, slid them back into the leather book, and held it tight against me. This house is mine, I said quietly. Not because a will says so, but because Dad trusted me with it. He trusted me with his truth. And I'm not letting either of you take that away. Mark's fists trembled, his face flushed with fury, but he didn't step forward. Mom's lips tightened, her eyes narrowing, but she didn't speak. The silence was their surrender. I turned toward the door, each step heavier than the last, the weight of the book anchoring me. The shadows of the past still lingered, but for the first time, I wasn't drowning in them. I was carrying them forward, as proof, as weapon, as shield. When I reached the threshold, I paused and looked back one last time. Dad's gone, I whispered, my voice breaking. But his truth isn't, and it belongs with me. Then I stepped out into the night, the cool air washing over me like a promise. The house didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a battle I had finally claimed. And with every letter pressed against my heart, I knew this wasn't just survival. It was victory.